Welcome back, fellow outdoor enthusiasts, to part 2 of our in-depth exploration of the rut on Tracks and Tackle, proudly brought to you by Menser Outdoors. I'm the Arrow Eagle, and alongside me is my co-host, the Hollywood Horse. In part 1, we delved into the science and significance of the rut. Now we're continuing our journey, exploring more of its mysteries and sharing some of our own memorable rutting experiences. Today we'll discuss hunting strategies, rut myths, and captivating stories that make the rut season like no other. So grab your gear and get ready for another exciting episode as we continue our adventure into the heart of the rut. Are you all set? Let's roll. I think what I would like to do is, we all have understanding of what the rut is if you've been hunting for any time, but there's a lot of opinions about the rut, and there's also a lot of myths out there. And so I thought it would be nice for us to sit and talk about a couple of these myths that are out there, some of the more prevalent ones. Certainly, there are misconceptions about white-tailed deer rut in the hunting and outdoor community. So let's take a closer look at a few of those. And the first one I want to talk about, because I know that we hunt the moon phase. When we schedule our time of coming to camp, we do look at the phase of the moon. But there's, the myth out there is many hunters believe that the specific moon phases, such as full moon, can significantly influence deer activity during the rut. When the reality is, scientific studies have failed to establish the strong correlation between moon phases and deer rutting activity. Now, what the moon will do, that deer behavior can be influenced because of visibility. Things like temperature, food availability, and hormone changes all can be impacted. But the moon phase connected to the rut specifically, it has not been scientifically established, right? So, another thing is another myth, I guess would be all bucks are active during the rut. It's a misconception that all bucks are highly active and aggressive during the rut, but reality is the rut does increase buck activity, but not every buck is going to respond the same way. They're not equally active or dormant. Dominant bucks, mature bucks, they're going to be more likely to engage in aggressive behaviors, and they're going to be mating with those receptive does. Younger, less dominant bucks are going to maybe remain a little bit more passive. It's no different than, a schoolyard fight. Who feels the most dominant is probably going to behave differently than somebody that feels a little bit more passive. So I think, just talking about the myth or the misconception that all bucks become highly aggressive, that's not always the case, because not all bucks are created equal. Why don't you tell us about a few of the myths that you have heard of that are maybe more commonly talked about in the outdoor community?
Yeah, so kind of touching on what you said, I think Mother Nature has its course, so there's not always equality. We can also kind of look into like childbirth. You're given almost a due date, and you're pretty close to the due date, but we have outliers, like a parabola. You have some women that have their children prematurely with weeks early, and you have some children that are a little bit later. But yeah, some more myths that we researched and we kind of have a good general understanding of is rut-induced aggression. A common myth is that it's the bucks will become more aggressive, resulting in more fights between them, while in reality it does increase the aggression, but it does not mean it's a constant state of aggression. So the interactions will be quick and few and far between. So more posturing, more vocalization compared to the physical combat that we like to think of. Serious fights you might see on social media where there's a dead buck or the horns are locked up. That's very rare and few and far between. Also, bucks. It's commonly thought that bucks don't eat during the rut. So they do eat, but it's less of their focus. So it's less frequent and it's more sporadic. but they do continue to eat when the opportunity arises. Their focus is very, very much shifted. This leads us into estrus doe behavior. It's commonly assumed that does in estrus exhibit highly visible and consistent behavior, while in reality, their behavior can vary widely. Some exhibit signs such as flagging their tail and vocalizing more, letting themselves be known, while others may be less conspicuous. Factors like genetics, age, individual temperament play a role in how the does behave when in estrus. Another topic we want to cover here is that rut is fixed calendar event.
That's a big one, I think. I think the debate within the hunting community is, when does the rut happen? Does it happen at the same time? Is it a fixed calendar event? Is it based on the moon? Is it based on the temperature? So yeah, this is an interesting one to me.
Yeah, because planning my PTO and when I'm going to get here to camp, I base it around 2 weekends taken off, but you don't know, hey, when am I going to take this week off? But we touched on it, like the climate, the temperature, and just the area that you're in. It all plays a very huge role into the rut. And the last thing is, a lot of people like to think that hunting is easier during the rut. Hunting is hunting. It's not called finding. So the rut can lead to more activity, while you still got to get out in the woods and you still got to, establish where the deer are, and you got to do your research. But it still can be a little bit tougher for the hunters, but they have to be strategic in their planning and have a good understanding of the deer's behavior. Yeah, so here's a couple myths that we wanted to debunk and put out there for the public to have a better understanding of. So it's essential to understand these if you're a hunter or an outdoor enthusiast. This will help improve your understanding of deer behavior during the rut and lead to more effective and informed hunting strategies.
Yeah. So like that hunting, the rut myths, that's a big one because everybody's got their opinions, and I can sit here and probably give you scientific evidence and recommendations on certain things, but you're still going to have guys that believe what they believe because it's always worked for them. We all have our own observations, our own experiences, and the rut's incredibly challenging time for hunters for several different reasons. I could share stories about seeing the increased. I love hunting the rut because of the increased activity. I can share success stories. I can share sob stories with how the rut's not been the greatest to me, but it can be a challenging time and it can be a captivating time. So what we're going to just recap some of these things that we touched on, but it's the increased deer activity or some things that we observe. Both bucks and does are more active, and they're both more mobile during this time of year than any other time of year. The bucks are going to constantly be seeking out does and estrus, and so we know if you hunt other times of the year, those does are maybe moving through out in the open fields, but the bucks, they're very cautious. They don't get to be big bucks by being dumb bucks, but the movement makes them more accessible to hunters. And so that increased activity often leads to more opportunities for hunters just to spot and pursue these deer, And so those rut-related behaviors, when we talked about the bucks, how they're scraping and they're rubbing and they're vocalizing and chasing does. We just, before we sat down and started recording this podcast, we took a walk up through the mountain and through the woodlands, and we were looking at those scrapes and we were looking at those rubs and trying to spot out those trails, where's the deer activity, so we can pattern them. But when the rut comes in, you can throw some of it out the window because these behaviors can both be exciting to witness and useful for us, but when rutting activity occurs, they're going to go wherever the does are going to go, right?
Yeah, I've seen it a lot firsthand. My success stories, nothing that I'm going to send off to the taxidermist, but I've seen a couple nice monsters that were out there, but you're sitting in the stand, you're excited, the rut's coming along, and then before you know it, you look and you see something flying through the woods, and there's a deer chasing another, and then they're gone.
Oh my God.
They're up the hill or down the hill, but you get all excited, but they're just zooming.
Yeah, so I can think a couple years back, I was over here hunting on one of our neighbors' plots of land, and I was up in a tree stand, and this real nice 9-point comes flying through, and I'm hunting with a bow. There's no chance of getting a shot off it. All you can do is watch him, but with that aggression piece, I mean, he was on that doe, trailing her, and he was moving quick through, and it's just like the intensity of this type of year. So, we do get that trophy buck potential. The rut's time when dominant mature bucks are more likely to be active and visible, so you see them, but this presents an excellent opportunity where you can maybe find that target trophy buck, for the taxidermist, where those large ones are probably less active and more cautious during other times of the year. That all goes out the window. But with that, we have some challenges too. While the rut provides unique hunting opportunities, it also presents us with challenges like the bucks being so focused on the does, it makes them less cautious about their surroundings. Yeah, but it leads to tunnel vision, and they're not predictable in this time of year.
Timing is everything.
Yeah, so those experiences that we have where they just come crashing through, there's not a whole lot of reaction time sometimes, right?
Gets the heart going, though.
Yeah, so while you're on timing, why don't you touch on that?
Yeah, it's all about being in the right place at the right time, making sure that you get out there crack of dawn. I like to get out there preferably even a half hour before that. It's not shooting daylight, but you got yourself in position.
Yeah, you're positioned well.
Yeah. And, you're setting yourself up for better success. There's been times that moving through the woods, I almost jump deer up. I can hear some crackling through the woods, but they didn't see me. I didn't see them. They don't know what it was. They could just assume that, it's a predator coming through, or, they could just be more cautious and more the side of error just to get out of the woods. But
yeah, I think during the rut, the woods may be a little bit more forgiving.
Yeah,
because you can make a mistake, but those bucks are so tunnel vision on those does, they're willing to look past it.
Yeah, so in these times, I remember a specific one. I think you were along with me, but we jumped a few does, and we ended up we just ended up like, oh crap, but we stayed secured in our location, didn't move, and they ended up passing back through. Yeah, you just gotta adapt on the fly and just have a good understanding of the deer's behavior, and know to patient is everything. But during this captivative moment of the rut, it's all about the thrill of the chase. The rut is here. It's go time. You're setting yourself up for better success. So it's just such a thrilling time to be in the woods, and just the joy of not knowing what's going to happen next. Like I said, just in an instance, your hunt could be flipped.
Yeah, so it's anticipation.
Yeah.
Right? We're anticipating. You don't know what's going to happen next because you can throw a lot of the tendencies out the window, but you know that any moment could be the moment.
Yeah.
All right. So in summary, the rut is captivating and challenging for hunters, basically because it's gives us this unique blend of increased deer activity, the rut-related behaviors, and the potential to harvest trophy bucks. But it also demands us to adapt our skills to unpredictable circumstances and the competition from other hunters because there's more guys in the woods, right? So that making it a season that tests both our knowledge and our patience as hunters. In conclusion of, our experiences, we all have personal experiences of hunting the rut and experiencing the rut. And I'm thinking of a couple of times, where I've had some really exciting deer hunting. I think like 2 or 3 years ago, where we hunt, it's not like you got a pile of deer. The deer are there, but we're not hunting big soybean fields, and, you get to choose between 13, 14 different buck that come into you every night. If you see a buck, you need to decide whether you're going to take your shot that night or you're going to let it pass and wait for a bigger buck. And during the rut, we do see that increased activity and movement and whatnot. So I just remember like 2 or 3 years ago, it didn't matter what stand I went and I sat in, I was seeing deer. I shared the story about that one doe moving through and a couple of bucks tailing her and trailing her until that dominant one came in. I've also had that experience. I shared that short story of, sitting in the stand one year and just seeing that big old 9+ points. It's hard to tell because he was moving so fast, but he came just like busting through the
Likely
woods.
story.
Yeah, right. If you had to be there to see it, or you wouldn't believe it. But I mean, he was just tearing down through the woods. But I remember one time, and I was probably only 12, 13 years old. I was a young hunter, and I was walking one of these old logging roads because I was cold and I couldn't sit still long enough. And it's a crazy story because I was young, inexperienced hunter, and I'm walking this long road. And what I did was I was just going to I was exploring the terrain because I didn't know the terrain. And I thought, well, I'll walk down this logging road and then I'll turn and I'll walk back. And so what I did was I set my bow down, I set my backpack down, and I just went for a little bit of a stroll. And I got maybe 100 yards away from where my bow was, laying in the middle of the road, which you never walk away from your weapon. And I'm walking down this road, and all of a sudden I hear this clatter happening. And then up over the bank onto the road comes this buck in reverse. I'm like, why is that deer walking backwards? Well, when his head appeared, he was attached to another buck, and they were fighting, and he was coming forward, driving him up across the road. And they had no clue that I was there. And I continued to walk toward them because I just wanted to see how close I could get. And I realized when I got within like 50 yards of these deer, and they were just in the middle of this logging road, locked horn, locked antlers, I realized I could probably shoot one of these deer and they don't even know. But my bow was 100 yards behind me. So I turned and I started to walk, not, I didn't want to spook them. So at a pretty steady pace, I started working back to get my bow. And I went back and I picked my bow up off of the spot where I left it, and I started walking down. But till I got to them, they had made themselves up across the road and back into the next patch of forest. So very cool experience as a young hunter to get to see something like that, but very valuable lesson.
Lesson learned.
That I learned, you never walk away from your weapon in the woods because you never know what you're going to see, when you're going to see it. It can happen at any time, especially during the rut. So how about yourself? Any cool stories of hunting the rut or experiences that you've had?
Well, I just think, I believe it was last year, where I hunt, there's 2 stands here, and there's about a 200-yard difference between them. I was in one, and my father was in the other one. He's on top of the hill. So he was already up at camp, kind of established. I think I had to work midway through the week. So I got up here around 4 o'clock or so. I got my crossbow. I just cocked it, put one arrow into it. Didn't bother packing anymore because I'm like, I'm only going out for an evening hunt. Like one shot, one kill, it'd be perfect. But I go out there and a buck comes crashing through, and he had a bloody nose, so it was coming downhill from where my father shot. But I shot, just to make sure that we got it, and never found the arrow. I don't even think I hit the deer, but then I'm just kind of like, well, crap, like I don't have any more arrows. So I just kind of sat there and enjoyed nature. I think a doe or two came through, but yeah, I learned a lesson from that moment to pack arrows. But yeah, just in general, just rut is so thrilling. My favorite part about hunting it is our family tradition. We come up here for a week or whenever you can get off, to come up and hang out. But it's like Christmas morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That excitement you get when you're a little kid is how hunting the run is. You just come out and you're itching to go.
Yeah, and I remember that night that you came up late, late in the day, because we were out hunting, your dad and I, and we came back, and you were down here at camp, and you said you had seen a buck come down barreling through the woods, and you took a shot at it. Now, just to be clear for our listeners, your dad shot that deer up on top, and it came running down towards the stand you were in, and that was the bloody nose it had.
Yeah.
And even though
I gave it a
you're
heart
not
attack.
sure if you hit it or not, you're taking half credit for the extermination of that buck.
The extra stress induced.
Yes. Yeah, I could get into a story about giving a deer a heart attack. You know, we've seen deer die out of crazy stories, but I won't get into that one today. Maybe in some future episodes we can talk about that. So, well, listen, let's just sort of wrap things up here and talk a little bit about conservation and rut management, because part of the heart of what we believe, one is tradition and passing legacy on to another generation of outdoorsmen and women. But it's also conservation, caring for the land, caring for the property, caring for the deer populations. And so I just want to talk a little bit about the deer population management and conservation efforts, and understanding how the rut plays a role in that, for several important reasons. And so just to touch on population control itself, when we understand the timing of the rut, wildlife managers like ourselves can make informed decisions about when to implement hunting seasons to control those deer populations. Deer are in the woods all year long, but we have hunting seasons and regulations for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just as we were talking about, like the does, when they do give birth to fawns, it's in spring. There's the cycle of nature and the way that God created us, that these fawns are being born in spring and during summer, so that there's a better chance of their survival. Well, we can do these things as wildlife management and conservationists. We establish hunting seasons based on understanding the life cycle and the reproductive cycle of these deer. Hunting during the rut can be highly effective because the deer are going to be more active and visible, like we discussed. So this increases our ability to harvest deer and manage that deer population. But in addition to that, you got disease management, right? And understanding how the rut works, it can help identify when deer are more likely to come into close contact with other deer. And one of the things we deal with here is CWD, chronic wasting disease. There's also bovine tuberculosis within deer populations. And we want to control these things. Certainly, it's nothing that I hate more than seeing pictures or videos online, social media. You see these deer that have this chronic wasting disease, and there's nothing. Once they get it, they haven't figured out what to do about that. So
Ugly.
Yeah, it really is ugly. So why don't you go ahead and tell us some other things we can do as far as conservation efforts?
Yeah, big thing is to monitor the reproduction rates. So the rut's primary period for the mating, and monitoring the successful timing and success of the mating during the rut is key for wildlife biologists to gain further insights. With hunting, we take, and then as the rut goes through, reproduction and give back. We have to monitor the period so that there's a good balance, so you don't take too much or give too much, so that there's equilibrium throughout these woods. Genetic diversity is another key topic. Conservation efforts aim to monitor or enhance genetic diversity within the deer population. So understanding which bucks are successful breeding will give us further insight into what the future holds for that population and what genetic traits will be passed on to their offspring.
Yeah, and we were just checking those trail cameras while we're up here at camp last night before we were started the podcast, and we saw a young buck trying to breed a doe on camera, and it's early. Like we're doing this, we're taping this right now, and it's end of August, not quite September yet, but these young buck, they're gonna, uh, I don't know what he's thinking, but she wasn't resistant either, and we want to see big dominant buck be the breeders on the hill, because you want that genetic population to grow. We
We
want
don't
good.
want no spikes.
Yeah. I remember when we came up here and started hunting this mountain. Oh man, maybe 25, 30 years ago, however long it was. This mountain was covered with spikes, and it wasn't just young spikes. Like, we were seeing 3, 4 year old deer with cow horn spikes. They were just growing out, but they weren't getting anything other than that. And we've seen over the years how managing the deer population in the herd, being smart about it. Some of it is just nature taking care of itself. Some of it is human interaction with how we're managing the herds and things. But here we are 30 years later, and we're seeing some really nice hammers, walking through the woods, and not as many little spikes moving through that we did once upon a time have. So,
What are your takes on the 3-up rule? Are you a fan of it? Do you dislike it?
I think that it helps to allow, it forces hunters, in Pennsylvania, what he's talking about is we've got antler restrictions, and you got to have so many points on that deer before you can legally harvest a buck. And so, while as a young hunter, I want to see the younger people, or newer hunters, I'll say, getting into it, have the opportunity to harvest deer, because that's going to get them hooked on the sport. I do like the antler restrictions, because it forces the rest of us to let some deer walk and gives them an opportunity to grow. And it also, gives opportunities for us to get to the point where you got those dominant gene bucks, those bigger bruisers, those hammers that can hopefully mate and reproduce. So for me, I'm in favor of it. Some hunters, look, I mean, we all have that buddy that's going to go out and let a spike or a 4-point have it, no matter what they say preseason, pre-rut. But you also have guys that are trophy hunters, and they're just going to let anything pass until they get their target buck, and they have just a little bit different discipline, and we do have reference our podcast episode about shooter pass, because we did talk about the differing viewpoints on shooting small bucks versus letting them grow into the big ones. But to answer your question, I am in favor of the antler restriction, because it doesn't make these bucks out of reach. It just lets you, the 1-year-olds, and then sometimes, I guess in some cases, a 2-year-old, let them walk. But usually by 2 years old, those deer are going to have enough points that if you feel like you want to take that deer, you can.
Yeah, I'm all on board with what you're saying. The only, I guess, conflicting statement I got here is, what about those spikes, the 3, 4-year-old cow horn, as you said,
Yeah.
that kind of stick around and keep their genetics within the population? Maybe down the road they'll make a way to manage that way to keep a healthier deer population throughout these woods.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you have that, but usually, I'm just thinking, you got a 2-year-old, 3-year-old buck. Let's say you got 2, 3-year-old bucks, and one of them's a 6-point and one of them's a cow horn. If they're going to scrap,
natural selection.
Natural selection's going to work that out, in my opinion. That's not scientifically backed, but I think. But listen, there's also the story of, you got 2 big bucks like scrapping it out, and while the 2 big bucks are scrapping it out for the doe, you got the little buck that slides in and breathes that doe, while the 2 bigger bucks are, varying for dominance. So you're always going to have opportunities, and this has been going on for thousands of years. We haven't got it all figured out, but we do understand it enough that we can sit here and talk about it for
Right.
an hour or whatever on a podcast. But that's what makes it exciting. You really never know what's in the woods, what's going to come through, and we do our best to understand these things. This is why we scout, and this is why we put up trail cameras, and why we come up and we spend our time in the forest during the summer months, the non-hunting seasons. It's all to prepare for this magical time that happens in the fall.
Yeah, and being out in the woods, you always learn something new. Just keep your eyes open, ears open. Even in unsuccessful times, you can learn from your mistakes to set yourself up for the future. A couple other things we can do about rut management is actually is targeted harvest strategies, such as what you talked about there. If you see the two rack bucks, duking it out, but you see another buck that's just kind of doing its own thing, just walking around the woods. He's not really interested. Maybe he's planning for post rut, but you can manage, those two rack bucks. Those are going to be breeders, and you can work to manage that population there, so the genetics can pass through in the future, and we have more bounty of offspring. Also during this time, you can check in. You can see the buck to doe ratio. You can see what wildlife is in your woods, because things are going to be more active. So that'll give wildlife biologists better estimates for deer in a given area.
How many hunters do you think, because you got guys that like us to take this pretty seriously, and you got guys that take it super seriously, and they make us look like novices, and then you got your average day weekend warrior, hunter that goes out. But of the hunting population, how many guys do you think really understand your herd population, like buck to doe ratios and those type of things?
Not too many.
Yeah, there's a smaller group of hunters that take this to another level and really study the herd that they're hunting.
Yeah, and it comes down to, like, if you're hunting properties local to where you live, it's easier. You're going to be there more, so you'll have a better perception of what's going on around you. I know for us it's tricky, but we kind of honed in on it over the years of coming up here, with our camp being 2 to 3 hours away from home. That's a lot of trips you got to make. You got to set up with your gear. You got to really pay attention and honestly spend time out here to.
Yeah, there's a lot of logistics involved.
Yeah.
Whenever you're traveling versus hunting the family farm that's at home or whatever. Yeah. Well, listen, part of it's planning. You got to plan to make those trips. You need to, whenever you have a property that you like to hunt, or even guys that you travel out of state to hunt and hunt in different locations. There's logistics involved, but understanding how the rut works, certainly, and the timing of the different phases of the rut helps us with our planning and helps us to develop effective conservation plans for the deer population. So there are a lot of organizations out there, conservation organizations and wildlife agencies use this information to make informed decisions about habitat protection and putting in hunting regulations and those type of things, conservation measures. The planning that goes along, just like us planning our trips and when we go to hunting camp and when we go to the mountain and how much time we spend there and how little time we spend there to allow the wildlife to function as normal without human interaction and interference. The same thing applies to those wildlife managements and hunting regulations, or what I would say conservation organizations, to put in. There's a lot of logistics to put in and plan around how to secure habitat protection. And so when I say about how much time we spend in the woods versus how little time we spend in the woods, because we want the natural flow of wildlife and nature to take its course, understanding these seasons reduces human/deer conflict, right? In areas where the deer populations are overlapping with human communities, and I know that this happens in more urban areas, understanding rut behavior, it helps to manage and reduce conflicts such as, vehicle collisions. We see a ton of deer laying on the side of the road in the fall, and damage to farmers' crops and different landscaping. I know of a town out east where you can drive through town and it's a populated area, $1 million homes, and there are deer just laying in the flower beds in the front yards of these people's. It's just overpopulated, and a lot of the people that live in that area, they don't appreciate it because they want their property value. They want those flower beds and everything on the curb appeal to look immaculate. But you got deer coming in eating the buds off the flowers and things. So the human deer conflict piece really increases during rut, and understanding the timings of that, we can put strategies in place for controlling that deer movement during those time periods.
Yeah, and on the other side of that, you've got more rural where, in our agriculture town, the deer eating their crops and, rubbing up their trees. And there's a fruit farmer that lives close to us, and he's furious at these deer because these young bucks and these rut bucks, they've just planted some new peach or apple trees, and they're little saplings. Well, they're perfect rubbing trees. So,
Oh yeah,
all the money that they poured into getting these trees and planted and taking care of them, these young deer are coming in and destroying that.
It's their livelihood, these fruit farmers or, any type of farmers really, when you got animals coming and taking their crops. And I know I've talked to some of the farmers around the area, and it's not like the deer will sit and eat an apple off of an apple tree. It'll take a bite off of this apple, and then it'll walk another row down, and it'll take another bite off of another apple. And basically that's the way it goes on, So it wouldn't be so bad if they just ate an apple or two, but they're taking a bite out of, a ton of them, and it really impacts their livelihood. So definitely we want to reduce that. And then the last piece would be just observing and collecting the data on rut behavior. It's an essential part of going with research efforts to understand their populations, like we talked about. A lot of guys don't understand their herd population, but we can collect data, and it informs scientific studies for those guys that are geeks about this stuff and really want to understand it. The rut really gives us an opportunity to collect and study information and data that contribute to broader understanding of deer biology and ecology. So just to summarize, I'd say it's critical period for the deer population management and conservation efforts because it gives us valuable insights into all the things we talked about, the dynamics of reproduction, behavior, and the population itself. So understanding the rut, it gives people that want to manage wildlife strategies that promote healthy and sustainable deer populations. So what are your key takeaways from this conversation?
Well, there's a lot to take away, just realizing that the rut isn't uniplanar. It depends where you're at, the climate, the weather, what's going on in that environment. So just understanding that you can't pinpoint a date on your calendar and say,
Right.
hey, we're going here. You got to take a more open approach, and just more so knowing how exciting rut can be and using it as motivation to get yourself out in that tree stand a little bit more and having some fun out in the woods.
Yeah, and we can sit here and we can talk all day long about how amazing the rut is, but until you experience it, you're not going to know exactly what we're talking about until you see the buck parade coming through.
Right.
There's nothing like it. Well, yeah, I mean, I think for myself, key takeaways from this conversation is just really understanding the different phases, understanding pre-rut stage, and how the deer are interacting during that time, and then just physiology of how the bucks respond and the does respond whenever those hormones start to change in the peak rut period. Post-rut's always hard because I'm still hunting post-rut. So I'm believing that there are does out there that are going back into estrus if they were not, they didn't conceive during the peak rut. But the buck activity definitely dies down later in the season. And, where we hunt, it gets a lot colder in the post-rut season. And so, for me being an archery hunter, I do love that for a couple of different reasons. One, it's a little bit warmer, so I'm not freezing. You got a lot less hunters in the area. You got a lot less bow hunters than you do gun hunters. But when that rut hits, it's a game one for hunting season. In Pennsylvania, definitely where we're at. Any other thoughts before we wrap this up?
I'm just excited. We see some pre-rut activity.
Yes, we have.
Saw some promising pictures on our trail cameras. We might share a little bit of those later. But I'm just excited to get out in the woods. The clock's ticking for when rut's going to be here and when we all can get together as a family and embrace the moment and hopefully have some luck out here. If not, I know for sure we're going to make some memories.
Yeah, it's the camaraderie.
Yep.
It is really making memories together, and if the whole family can come and all of hunting camp can be filled, we know it's going to be a good time. But if not, the two of us, we're still trying to make our memories. We're getting out here and making the time to create those moments. So, well, listen, hunting family, you are part of this family experiment that we're doing here, and we appreciate you for joining us on this episode of Tracks and Tackle, brought to you by Menser Outdoors. We've had a fantastic time delving into the world of white-tailed deer rutting behavior and thrilling challenges that it presents to hunters. So remember, whether you're an experienced outdoorsman or just starting out, there's always something new to discover about the great outdoors, and that's what we're all about. So before we sign off, we just want to give a big thank you to those sponsors, Menser Outdoors, for making this podcast possible. Really, they're not... It's not like they said, hey, go make a podcast. They're just not stopping us from doing it. So great group of guys. We appreciate the support and bringing you informative, engaging content about hunting, fishing, and this outdoor lifestyle. Be sure to subscribe to Tracks and Tackle if you haven't already, so you're not going to miss any of these future episodes. Give us a 5-star rating. If you've enjoyed today's show, we're incredibly grateful if you could take a moment and do that. Just give us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback is what helps us grow and improve our content. We're primarily undiscovered talent right now, but we do this for the love of the outdoors more so than, we're not selling anything. We're just a bunch of guys that love hunting, fishing, and being outdoors. So don't forget, you can connect with us on social media for latest updates. You want to see some of those trail cam pics and these deer that we're talking about, follow us on Instagram. You can just search for either Tracks and Tackle on your favorite platforms or Menser Outdoors. And if you have questions, stories, or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Send us an email at menseroutdoors@gmail.com. We love hearing from our hunting family, and we'd be happy to entertain some of those questions as future topics. So, as always, stay safe, respect the outdoors, and remember to leave no trace that you've ever been there. Leave it better than you found it. Till next time, keep your lines tight and your shots true. This is the Arrow Eagle and
Hollywood Horse.
We're going to be signing off to experience our next adventure.